You know the name. Spartacus. The gladiator who defied an empire, the slave who became a general, the hero who fought for freedom against the might of Rome. We've seen the movies and the series. We imagine a glorious final stand, a warrior's death, sword in hand, a legend forged in defiance. But what if the legend is a sanitized version of the truth? What if the reality of Spartacus's end was not a blaze of glory, but a descent into unimaginable horror? The history books give us the simple facts of a rebellion crushed, but the truth, buried under 2,000 years of dust, is a story of desperation, starvation, and a man so utterly erased by his enemies that his final moments are a terrifying void. This is the story of how Spartacus really died, and it's far more brutal than you can possibly imagine. Before he was a symbol, he was a man. While details are scarce, historians like Appian and Plutarch agree he was a Thracian, a man from a land known for its fierce warriors. He wasn't born a slave. He was likely an auxiliary soldier in the Roman army, a man who fought for the very empire he would later terrorize. For reasons lost to history, he was branded a deserter, sold into slavery, and thrown into the brutal gladiator school of Capua. Imagine that fall from grace, from a soldier to human property, forced to kill for the entertainment of others. This wasn't a life, it was a death sentence on an installment plan. His military background gave him the skills, but it was this burning core of injustice that gave him the will to do the impossible. He knew Roman tactics, and he was about to turn their own methods against them. The spark of rebellion, from kitchen knives to an army. The rebellion didn't begin with a grand plan. It began in a kitchen. In 73 BC, around 70 gladiators, armed with nothing more than cleavers and knives, fought their way out of their barracks in Capua. It was a desperate, almost suicidal act. After their escape, they stumbled upon a wagon full of gladiatorial weapons, a stroke of luck that turned a brawl into an armed insurrection. They fled to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, a seemingly foolish move. The Romans, arrogant and dismissive, sent a force of 3,000 men to seal the only path down the mountain, assuming the slaves would starve. But Spartacus was a brilliant strategist. He had his men weave ladders from wild vines, and under the cover of darkness, they rappelled down a sheer cliff face, got behind the Roman soldiers, and launched a surprise attack. The Romans were annihilated. It was a stunning, humiliating defeat for the Republic, turning a band of fugitives into a symbol of hope for every slave in Italy. The victory at Vesuvius was a match thrown on a powder keg. News spread like wildfire. Slaves from all over the Italian countryside flocked to Spartacus's banner, and his army swelled from dozens to tens of thousands. They were a motley crew, poorly equipped but highly motivated, and led by a tactical genius. Rome, still viewing this as a minor nuisance, sent 2 more legions. And again, Spartacus outmaneuvered and crushed them. He used guerrilla tactics and ambushes to inflict defeat after defeat. His army marched north, its numbers swelling to over 100,000 men, women, and children. For 2 years, Spartacus was invincible. He created a living nightmare for the Roman Senate, proving that the vast slave population that powered the Republic could rise up and shatter it. The fear in Rome was palpable. This was the Third Servile War, and Rome was losing. This massive, mobile nation of former slaves was also its own worst enemy. Within this great host, fractures began to appear. Spartacus, the pragmatist, understood they couldn't defeat Rome forever. His plan was clear: march the army north, over the Alps, and back to their homelands in Thrace and Gaul. He wanted to give his people their lives back. However, many in his army, particularly a contingent led by a Gaul named Crixus, had other ideas. They had tasted victory and wanted revenge. They saw Italy as a prize to be looted. This fundamental disagreement split the rebellion. Crixus and about 30,000 men broke away and were soon cornered and annihilated by Roman forces. While Spartacus defeated the legions that killed Crixus, the damage was done. The internal division had cost them thousands of lives and their unity, setting the stage for their eventual doom. Enter Crassus, Rome's richest and most ruthless man. With its best generals busy overseas, a desperate Roman Senate turned to Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome, but he craved military glory. He saw the war against Spartacus as an opportunity, funding his own legions and raising an army of nearly 50,000 men. Crassus was methodical, patient, and utterly ruthless. When one of his legions fled in an early skirmish, Crassus brought back a brutal punishment, decimation. The fleeing cohort was divided into groups of 10, and each group drew lots. The soldier who lost was then beaten to death by his own 9 comrades. Crassus forced his men to become executioners. The message was terrifyingly clear: he was more to be feared than the enemy. The war had a new commander, one who would win through absolute, unrelenting terror. The wall of desperation, trapped and starving. After a series of bloody battles, Spartacus led his army to the toe of Italy in Rhegium, hoping to cross to Sicily. He paid pirates to transport his army, but they took the money and abandoned him. It was at this moment of vulnerability that Crassus executed his masterstroke. He put his legions to work building a wall that stretched for over 35 miles, from one sea to the other. It was a massive, impassable cage. Spartacus and his entire army were trapped. As winter set in, supplies dwindled. The once mighty rebel army was now reduced to a starving, freezing mass of people, watching their hopes die. Every morning, they would wake up and see that wall, a symbol of Roman power and their own impending doom. The war of battles was over, now it was a war of starvation. Hope was all but lost. Trapped behind the wall, Spartacus's army was being destroyed by famine. He knew that staying put meant a slow, agonizing death. The only option left was to fight their way out. On a dark, stormy night, they filled a section of the ditch with earth, wood, and the bodies of prisoners, creating a crude bridge. They threw everything they had at the wall in a single, frenzied assault. A portion of his army managed to break through, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. They were free from the cage but were now a shadow of their former strength, deep in enemy territory with Crassus's legions in hot pursuit. In a chilling act of defiance before this final campaign, Plutarch tells us Spartacus crucified a Roman prisoner, showing his own followers the fate that awaited them if they were captured. There was no surrender. The only way forward was victory or death. The end came in 71 BC at the Battle of the Salaris River. The remaining rebel forces were finally cornered. Historical accounts say that as the final battle was about to begin, someone brought Spartacus his horse. He drew his sword and killed it, declaring, "If I am victorious, I shall have many horses. If I am defeated, I shall not need one." He was committing himself to fight and die on foot, alongside his men. His goal in the battle was singular and suicidal: to kill Crassus. He saw the Roman general and charged directly into the heart of the Roman legions. The historian Appian wrote that Spartacus made a dash for Crassus himself, through a shower of weapons and wounded men. He cut down 2 centurions in his path, but the sheer weight of numbers was too much. Wounded by a spear in his thigh, he dropped to one knee and continued to fight until he and the men around him were finally overwhelmed and cut down. An unmarked grave, the mystery of Spartacus's body. This is where the story takes its most terrifying turn. In our modern retellings, we imagine a hero's death, his body recognized by a respectful foe. The reality was pure butchery. When the fighting was over, the Romans scoured the battlefield, looking for the body of the man who had humbled them for 2 years. They never found it. Spartacus's body was never identified. He was so completely hacked to pieces, his remains so indistinguishable from the thousands of other corpses littering the field, that he was simply gone. Erased. There was no grave, no monument, no final resting place. Rome denied him not only his life but his very identity in death. For a figure who had become a living legend to be reduced to anonymous, butchered flesh is a horror that surpasses any noble death scene. He was swallowed by the violence he had unleashed. The road of crucifixion, Crassus's final, brutal message. Crassus's vengeance was not finished. Around 6,000 survivors of the battle were captured, and for them, a fate far worse than death in battle awaited. To ensure this rebellion would serve as a permanent warning, Crassus ordered all 6,000 of them to be crucified. Not in one place, but along the Appian Way, the main road leading from Capua where the rebellion began all the way to Rome. For 120 miles, the crosses lined the road. For weeks, perhaps months, travelers would be forced to witness the slow, agonizing deaths of the rebels. The stench of death would have hung in the air for miles. It was a calculated act of state-sponsored terror on a scale rarely seen. Crassus wasn't just killing men, he was killing an idea. The message was seared into the consciousness of the Republic: this is the price of defiance. The legend of Spartacus is not one of a glorious death. It's a terrifying cautionary tale. A story of a man who flew closer to the sun than any slave before him, only to be utterly and completely annihilated. His body was lost, his followers were made into a grotesque spectacle, and his enemy, Crassus, claimed victory. But history is a funny thing. Crassus is now largely a footnote. Yet the name of the slave he erased, Spartacus, has echoed through millennia as a timeless symbol of the fight for freedom. In the end, perhaps Rome didn't truly win. The man was destroyed, but the idea, the defiant spirit of the gladiator, became immortal. What part of this terrifying story did you find the most shocking? Was it the anonymous death, the wall of starvation, or the horrifying crucifixion of his followers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this dive into the dark side of history compelling, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that history forgot. Ring that bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.